Great, great. Well, again, I want to just welcome everyone. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are located. We wanted to just thank everyone for joining us for another installment in our Native Veterans Resilience and Wellness webinar series with Sean Bear, David Natseway, Ray Daw, um, with our American Indian Alaska Native HTC center here located at the University of Iowa. We, as Ray often reminds me, we began this project as really as a means of assisting those working with Native veterans to better understand the unique challenges that are comprised while assisting with issues around trauma and PTSD. That's really was how this series was um, initially conceptualized, and we've just sort of built on it from there during the last few months. But this training itself, and many of the trainings our centers do, is brought to you by the National American Indian Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center. We are part of the HTC network, which includes 10 regional centers, a network coordinating office, and the National Hispanic and Latino HTC. This project is supported by SAMHSA. The content is developed by the presenters, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or the American Indian Alaska Native HTC. A couple of things I wanted to just mention as well. We know that um, we know and want to acknowledge the current political climate right now, and we know that it may be stressful for many. And there may be those on the call today that have differing opinions. We want to just remind everyone that, as always, we want to be respectful of each other during today's broadcast. We are recording this event, so it could be viewed at a later time. If you have a colleague, friend, family member, or a fellow veteran that was not able to join us today, I'd be happy to give you the link to our HTC archive where they can view this at their leisure. So just wanted to mention that. And immediately following today's webinar, you will be redirected to our GIPRA evaluation. We'll actually post the link to this short survey in our chat box. Ella will do that about the midpoint and then again towards the end. If you're not able to take the survey during the broadcast today, we will reach out to you following today's broadcast and give you another opportunity to do that via email. Please take a few minutes to fill out this short survey. We really, really appreciate your feedback, and it will help support future work that we do. But we do value your opinion, and we greatly appreciate your time and sharing any thoughts or feedback you can provide us. Well, as you know, you are currently muted, and that you will stay muted during the duration of the webinar. But please feel free to unmute if you have a question or comment that you'd like to ask our guest speaker or one of our other hosts, and use the chat feature as well. And I think there's a raise hand feature that you can also use to let the speaker or myself or Ella know that you'd like to make a comment. We are going to save the chat feature, the chat comments today in our archive. And so just be mindful of that as you're sharing. We would remove any sensitive information from that text accordingly. With that, I just want to introduce, we've asked our guest speaker, Dusty Pack, to return to follow up and provide an additional discussion about working with veterans and families. And we're hoping that Dusty can generate some discussion today on this topic. So I'm going to turn the floor over to him. As you remember, Dusty is a licensed professional counselor and a health systems redesign specialist from Sheridan, Wyoming. We're really happy to have him back here today, and we look forward to his presentation. We will broadcast again on I believe it's the 18th of December. We look forward to seeing you at that time as well. So keep your eyes open for an invitation or registration invite. On that note, I want to turn the floor over to Ray Daw so that we can open this discussion today in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for your fine introduction of everyone, and including all of us in your dialogue. The right way that Steve is mentioning is for us to begin our chat and learning with a blessing. And I'll go ahead and do that right now. I'm Navajo from New Mexico, so I'll be doing I'll be offering my blessing to all of us and our relatives and family, friends in my language and in the traditional Navajo way. I am Kia Ani. My mother's clan, my father's clan is Tlazatlan, many goats, and my maternal grandfathers are Sitnachini or Blackstreet people, and my paternal grandfathers are Bitterwater people, Twidichini. I'm originally from Hawk, Arizona, and I have to go through the process of doing my formal introduction in Navajo for my Navajo relatives that might be here with us. Bai kodo shikedo the dead and lini kodo tahasi last. Get a no bestan of song of the end and the kodo. It's the last sword and the clinico, it's the last sword. Isn't that the shito, it's the last sword of a gate and clinic quite bad data. I laid the last sword, bajo button it's in quite he credian. Other corn he gave he and lini dusty equa. He's put his net on, ye out of lashing ye and his target is in Shuluyatio. Albazat nan Tinliniki Ekudo Yatio Kudo, Peta Eliado Le, so Yatio Kudo, you could sick his lily, you know, jade and lily Kudo. Peta Osado Le, stop it and it ate a little so Shnikuya Nasco. Yatio Nani Catolani, Scottiqua, the Indian question. Stani Nani Kia Scopstana Sono Yato Nasconani Catol Janta has changed the and Qui. What I said as an Ishlado, Lujanasli, 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 Lujanasli. He asked the Creator and the holy people to be with all of us as Dusty gives us his presentation and this learning opportunity that he's agreed to give us, and that the learning that we gain from him, and the talk that we have with him, goes into our hearts, into our minds in a really clear way, in a crystal way, so that we can move ahead and do the best we can be for our relatives, our veteran relatives, our people who work with our veterans and the families of our veterans, so that we can just be the best we can with each other and all of them. So that was my blessing, and thank you, everyone. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ray. I'll turn the floor over now to our presenter today, Mr. Dusty Pack. We're happy to have him back. And Dusty, the floor is yours.
Okay. Do you want to give me hosting capabilities so I can share a presentation? All right. So like Steve was saying, my name is Dusty Pack. I'm a licensed professional counselor for the VA medical system in the Sheridan area in Wyoming. So nice and cold here right now. I think some of you guys are enjoying some much better weather than we have. It is a pleasure to be speaking with you guys another week here. And I really appreciate that opening prayer you do there, Ray. That is really impactful. It's a nice way to start meetings. I wish more of the meetings I was in started that way. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about just interacting with veteran family members during a pandemic, and helping family members support their family hero. So this is going to be connotated both towards providers that are working with families and some of the strategies that we can teach and use with families to help out with their veteran family member that's struggling. They're kind of universal techniques that can be used for a variety of different situations, but I'll connotate our conversation today as far as helping out with veteran family members that may be struggling, especially during these conditions that are taking place with the pandemic right now. As always, please, please, please stop me if you have any questions, comments, feedback, anything you'd like to add, personal experience, anything like that. I welcome the conversation and would prefer to interact with you guys rather than just stand here and talk for the next hour to you. So I know it's not exciting for anybody. So please engage me at any point you get. Let's see, a little bit else. So Steve had mentioned a little bit about my background. I am a licensed professional counselor here. I've been working with veterans for several years, many different walks of life, in residential and outpatient and inpatient settings. So all the way from people that are working and functioning in the community and having some general struggles, substance abuse, family struggles, things like that, all the way to individuals hospitalized in a lockdown psychiatric unit and working with those individuals to help get them the care that they need. Some of my work has been with the tribes in my area and surrounding areas, and that's been very rewarding work because I think the tribes in the areas are very underserved populations. So getting out there and being able to shake some hands and meet some people has been really great. So of course, I always like to start my presentations with a couple quotes. So today you get a little bit from Maya Angelou, which same from the last one. So nothing will work unless you do. And I always find that to be a really powerful quote. I actually keep this on my wall in my office. And then just a little bit about the approach that I'm going to be offering today. So these are a couple quotes from family systems theory or systemic family therapy. So family systems theory does not attempt to find treatments of causes nor of symptoms. Rather, it gives a living system nudges to help them to develop new patterns together, taking on a new organizational structure that promotes an environment of positive growth. So the impact of each element in a system depends on the role played by each other element in the system. And this is really important because from a systemic approach, we don't ever view an individual as being independent within the system. Rather, the system is connected systemically. Everybody's connected, and a change in one part of the system always elicits some sort of effect in the greater system as a whole. And that's one of the core concepts of family systems therapy or any other systemic therapy, that we're all systemically linked in that sense. So if we can elicit change in one part in a positive way, it's likely to elicit some sort of effect in another way. Families tend to be forward perpetuating towards positive gain and positive functional interactions. So we have that on our side, that if we elicit some changes, likely the family is going to do so in reference to a positive change. Okay. So when we're working with change management with veterans and families, there's a couple different approaches that we can take. And in fact, there's a whole lot of them. I'm going to present a couple today, but I wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about some of the things that take place within the family unit that we can address, things that you guys have seen out in your professional environments and working with families or personally, and then just give a couple of the tools that we have out there so that you leave here today with some sort of functional model, functional tool that you can work with and do something with. So I kind of wanted to give both sides of that, have a good intellectual conversation here and then get some tools to work with on the back end. So as a helping professional, we see veterans come in all the time where they're struggling with family dynamics, they're struggling with greater social environment dynamics, whether it's friends or their extended family or their cultural family or any of those kinds of things where they fit into various systems. And we see these struggles coming in a number of different ways. They're compounded by the symptomology and the traumas that they experience on a day-to-day basis related to and subsequent symptomology that comes from that. So as a helping professional, some of the things that you can do in a generalized fashion to help out both veterans and families is to provide realistic information on the change process. And I always kind of start with this one. because we want to demystify change. We want to talk a little bit about it. You know, what is change? What does it look like? What are the emotions attached to it? Yes, it can be scary. It can be exciting too. I really enjoy change. I work in change management because I really enjoy watching the process of change and watching the outcomes. Those same kind of rewards can be found within the family. So communicating that to the family systems is really important. Offering tools for eliciting and managing change. So this is going to be the functional side of things where we say, hey, you know, if you do X, Y, Z, something's going to happen. Don't know if it's good or bad, but something's going to happen. So these are our functional tools that give them something they can work with to try to do something. And the reason I offer this side of it is a lot of times within these family systems, especially when you have family members that are working with veterans and they just don't understand why or what's going on and that sort of thing, there's huge feelings of loss of control. And that comes with its own inherent challenges and struggles, and a lot of times, unfortunately, subsequent mental health symptomology. So offering tools to these individuals within the family, both the veteran and the family members, helps to bring a sense of control back to the family unit, because that's where their resources are, both from the family side and the cultural side. They're all embedded in that family system. So we want to bring the control back to them so that they're completely dependent within themselves and able to elicit positive change. Communicating understanding with non-judgment, unconditional positive regard, and hope. So as a helping professional, this is really important. Now, this isn't to say that you can't point out incongruence or make subtle challenges or even more direct interventions with individuals that require a little bit, more forceful approach. But at the end of the day, what we really want to do is communicate that understanding, even if it's just at an emotional level. So in my last talk, I talked about being able to relate with individuals where you have different experiences. So you can still communicate that understanding on an emotional level, understanding what they're feeling, what they're going through in that sense, and how that relates to your experiences with similar emotions. The non-judgment and unconditional positive regard is also very important. So when we're working with these families, especially when we have veterans in them, the family system may be experiencing some shame regarding the fact that they're having a problem, having to reach out for help. That may not be culturally appropriate to reach outside to an outsider for some sort of help in that sort. So there may be some negative emotions associated and things where.
Dusty, we're kind of losing you, chopping in and out on us there, or at least on my end. Yeah, we've lost audio, I think, Dusty.
Steve, I'll try to get him a number. Maybe he can even call in. So
Maybe need to call in.
yeah.
Have we lost him completely?
Yeah, I think so. See if we can get him back here.
There's back.
Oh, okay. My apologies, guys. I don't know what's going on. Using the
Try
same
and get
connection.
your phone number, Dusty. Ella will send you a phone number if we want to try that for audio if we need to.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah.
I think Dusty's inherently shy.
Yeah.
About that.
All right, let's see here. Where were we? Coming back to the spot that we were here. We'll try again, and I'll keep my phone real handy here so that we can I can call in if I need to, and I absolutely do that on the fly. My apologies, everybody. So let's see. So I was on a giant soapbox about communication and non-judgment and unconditional positive regard. So don't judge me on my bad internet connection. All right. And a little bit about hope. Hopefully my internet connection will stay. But make sure when you're working with these families that you are communicating a message of hope, that there is hope for better outcomes, for better interactions, to meet the goals that they've communicated, which is being a better family unit, likely with more cultural involvement, and more of those traditions embedded within the family structure and regular things that you do on a day-to-day basis. So really important there. Normalize dysfunction by reframing it in terms of utility towards meeting goals, whether that's emotional or behavioral. Does everybody kind of know what I'm saying with that, like normalizing dysfunction? And if I can ever find it, I'm going to turn on the chat again here, guys. So with normalizing dysfunction, the idea there is an understanding that families are always working towards the positive benefits or the best possible outcome within the family unit. So sometimes the best way to meet the needs of a family member in the moment, especially when they're struggling with symptomology or trauma or anything like that, may be a dysfunctional way of doing it. One that we talked about in a smaller group in another session was avoidance techniques. So, don't go by, Uncle Bob, because, if you step up behind him, he might just lay you out flat kind of thing. So, in respect for their struggle and the things that are going on, we adopt a dysfunctional avoidance method. Just to try to be accommodating for those things, when in fact there may be a more functional method of addressing that problem rather than just straight avoidance. So that's what normalizing dysfunction is just communicating that understanding that I get it. I understand why you do that. That makes sense given the nature of your situation and what you're experiencing and some of the struggles within the family. Like, I get it. No, maybe it's not the best possible option that you have, but it makes sense within your context. So giving that normalization to individuals is really, really powerful. And it shows that you're not judging, that you understand the situation. And then this last one's just a recommendation. Consider adopting a non-linear expectation of change, communicating it to veterans and family members. And what I mean by that is the idea of putting out that change isn't A to Z path, that it's a sine wave. Change goes up and down, whether it's behavioral or emotional, it doesn't matter. So the path to a change outcome isn't always just a straight shot to it. There's going to be relapses, whether that's substance abuse or psychiatric relapse. There's going to be those ups and downs. So I'll go ahead and stop there for just a second. Let's see if you guys got any kind of questions, comments, concerns, feedback, anything like that at this point. I believe Steve has opened some mics here, and I'm monitoring the chat. Okay, I see a comment in here, understanding and having troubles understanding the particular road of the native tradition and that sort in there. And I do understand what it is you're saying. And in my previous talk, I kind of addressed this a little bit. So with the situations and the specific experience of an individual, you're absolutely right. You really can't understand what that is, which is why I recommend bringing it back to the emotional content. So the emotional content is something that's relatively universal to the human condition. We all kind of understand what pain and regret and excitement and love and hate and all those things kind of feel like. So that's the area where I recommend trying to find that commonality rather than in the situational events or scenarios that happen. So relate to your individuals on an emotional level. And thank you for that, Sean. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, feel free to unmute if anyone, we do have some veterans in the audience or family members of veterans that will comment or have any questions. Feel free to unmute and share.
Yeah. And if you guys don't have something directly, let's throw this one out. What are some of your experiences, either individually within your family or in working with veterans, that you've seen of some of those positive dysfunction, we'll call it. So dysfunctional coping methods that serve a positive purpose. Have you guys seen any of that? Have you worked with that?
I think if you're talking about like with the DSM, dysfunction is not the same as with other cultures, because with the DSM was never designed to work with natives. So, in a lot of times when you're talking about mental health disorders, mental health kind of things like that, you could be talking about something that's actually normal within a Native culture.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. The DSM has a white Euro-American perspective for it, and has been criticized as such for many, many years. You're exactly right. And there are cultural nuances throughout many cultures that do not fit in specifically to it. And what may be maladaptive or dysfunctional in one may be completely functional and part of the cultural norm for another. So absolutely, that's a great point and is spot on as far as my opinion. Okay, well, we can move on forward from there. If nobody else has anything, by all means, interrupt me as we move on. Okay. So many tools exist for helping out family members. And I'm going to go into a few of these. And like I said, I wanted to point out a few things that maybe we could take away today that would be functional tools you can work with, or a jump off for conversation, or just a way of eliciting positive change. So we're going to step into kind of a change management role here and talk a little bit about how we do that, some of the techniques for that, and just some of the things to be cognizant of as we move forward. So these are a few tools, and it is a solution-focused approach. So it kind of waters down just a little bit from some of the deeper, more therapeutic approaches. Many tools do exist to help families and reinforce the management of symptomology and positive systemic growth. The nice thing about these approaches is they can be used and augmented with a cultural perspective to them for any of the emotionality that's attached, the goals and value setting, or the actual tests of change. They can all be done within cultural reference. And from the therapist perspective, it doesn't require you to be of the same culture or even have a real in-depth cultural understanding, because it puts the family in the role of the expert. So, which is what I would prefer to do in most cases. So family or veteran or anybody else I'm working with, let them be the expert of their change. And we just kind of facilitate and guide. So a couple that I'm going to talk about here are interpersonal and introspection skills. Rational emotive behavioral exchange strategies, only a little bit of a mouthful there. The GROW model for exploring change, what a great title, right? And PDSA approach to small tests of change. So interpersonal and introspection skills, my apology. Empower family members by teaching some of these following things. And the one that I always go back to, so for any clinicians that are in the room here or anybody with this kind of experience, this is going to be counseling day one, active listening skills. So identify the emotional content, bring out those emotion words, reflect the emotion. Make sure that your individuals within the family have the skills to be able to identify and reflect back to their partners, regardless of who that is in the family. Just make sure that they have those words within their nomenclature so that they understand how to do that. That's kind of the building block for changing the conversation, is switching it to one of emotions rather than one that just looks at situational factors. Use of I or my statements. I'm betting everybody in the room kind of knows what these are. So just switching that narrative to talking about yourself rather than projecting to others. Avoids any kind of confrontation a lot of times. It's not blaming, it's not judgmental. So it doesn't have that targeting effect that elicits negative responses. So it keeps it all personal, my things, not you. Summarizing and paraphrasing while avoiding parroting. So this is a really important one. You want people to be able to hear that you've heard what they said, that you really heard the words coming out and took it in, thought about it, and are able to have a conversation about it. So if we're just repeating back exactly what the other person said, then they just assume that we're just parroting. We're not really listening, that sort of thing, and it loses all value. It does not go very far to building trust or rapport with an individual or a family. Maintain an open posture. This is a real simple one. I throw it in here, but I think, it's one of the things that was kind of pounded into me early on and everything from it. And I think everybody else, a lot of people in this room, make sure your posture is open and inviting. It's never a great idea to walk into a session with a family and be like, all right, so tell me what's going on. Yeah, what are you doing? That's not the great approach for it. So we want to be open and inviting and make sure that people are comfortable with us, because we are trying to build that rapport and make sure that people are willing to talk about sensitive things, whether that's their veteran experience, their experience with a veteran, or really sensitive family issues. We want to make sure that all of that is there with that non-judgment and all those things to make it comfortable. Speak slowly and softly. This is my favorite technique for when people start ramping up. They ramp up, I speak slower and softer and slowly start bringing things down so it feels very comfortable and that sort of thing. So one of my favorite techniques, and I throw that one out there all the time, slowly and softly. Open-ended questioning. So unless you are looking for confirmation, like, is that correct? Make sure you're using open questions with people because it allows the opportunity for conversation and promotes that. It also models good questioning rather than yes, no, which again can have that negative interrogative kind of connotation. Seeing a few things in the chat here. I was just taking a real peek here. Yeah, I still agree with you there, Sean, on that stuff. Absolutely. So emotional identification. I think, again, everybody in this room is probably real skilled at this, but what are the emotions that the family member, the veteran, or the family as a whole are experiencing? So again, after we've trained this idea of being able to identify emotions and identify them personally, they have the words and stuff, then okay, great. What's being experienced by the family member that's struggling? And then what is the individual experiencing as a result of that? You know, what are my emotions in relation to this thing? So we've got this emotional content building. We see what's going on now. And then what emotions are the other family members experiencing? You know, how does grandfather perceive this blowout by the veteran? Or, you know, how do the children perceive it when mom and dad are really struggling? So really taking that in and getting family members to look at the larger emotional picture. All right, so once we've done a little bit of work on that, then we can move into some of the rational emotive behavioral exchange strategies. So basically the way, it's just an interrelational strategy is what we're looking at here. And there's a few different steps that are recommended with this. Yeah, I think it does largely exclude spiritual experiences, absolutely. I think the more inclusive approaches are taking that in a lot better and looking at the value that they have both in contributing to psychiatric symptomology and contributing to the potentiality for recovery as a source of strengths within the family system and the larger cultural system. Yeah, you make another good point there. So within this model, we're looking at defining the problem in a non-blaming way. So back to that non-judgment, non-blaming kind of thing. So we want to make sure we have an idea of what's going on and then focusing on one problem at a time. Real easy to get bogged down by a whole bunch of stuff. The next part is just to discuss the views rather than assuming the partner's views. So get individuals within the family using I statements talking about their own view of it. What do you think's going on? How do you perceive it? How does it affect you? And keeping that conversation focused within their internal locus of control, what they can actually do. Using empathetic listening and summarize what has been heard. So again, active listening sequence stuff we talked about. Then work on generating some solutions and really let the client, the family, the veteran, whoever it is you're working with, really work on developing solutions that are relevant to them. And this is where you inject the cultural piece of it. The therapist does not recommend the solutions. Make sure you're letting the veteran or the family unit, whichever you're working with, recommend these solutions themselves. And that's where they can bring in the cultural elements and everything and really find something that fits them, not a model we throw at them kind of thing. Decide upon a solution. Help urge them to move towards action. It's great to know why a problem's there, and we can spend forever doing in-depth psychoanalysis for years determining the why. But at the end of the day, we want something to change. So the what now is really, really important. That's this step. Decide upon some solutions, talk about them, look at it, and then do something. Implement the solution. Get something done. So this is a basic model for moving forward on there. We're going to look at the GROW model as well, and I'm going to move forward a little bit quicker just to give time for conversation at the end here. But the GROW model is another one that just looks at goal setting with plenty of room for values and cultural influence in this, both with what the veteran prefers as a veteran or as a Native American within that particular culture as well. The GROW model is really simple, but really, really powerful, and you can use it for a number of different things, from generalized goal setting or problem solving. I've used it for crisis resolution with staff that are in conflict and things like that. It's really powerful because it brings forward really valuable information, starting with what's the goal? What's your personal goal? Is it just to get the yelling to stop? Or is it to bring the family to a whole new level of communication and collaboration with game nights and everything else and doing fun stuff? Whatever that may be, what is the goal? Really define that. And then what's the reality of the situation? Where are we at currently? What's the current state? What's going on in this? And so we look at this and see, okay, this is what's happening over here. My goal is over here, but we're right here, right now. And so we got the reality. And then we bring in the options. And
We lost you again, Dusty. Your audio is out, and you are frozen. Oh, let's see if we can get him back, folks. Maybe this is a good opportunity to open the floor up as well. And if Dave or Ray or Sean or other maybe other veterans or family members of veterans in the audience have some comments, the floor is open.
Well, I appreciate Sean's comments about and views about how traditional ways are excluded. I think that's a real strong continuing discussion we have with within the field, and among the challenges we face in trying to keep your American psychology boundaries expanded to include what I describe as non-empirical experiences, you know, and so I think that's a valuable point to keep making when we have these kind of talks. The family boundaries are always in flux. Families are always in flux. They're ever changing, and because families and the American way of looking at families is a nuclear family. My way of looking at families and a lot of our native ways of looking at family is a heck of a lot more than that, you know. And from a extended family perspective, there's so much flux that goes on, change that goes on, that it is really a chore to it's really a chore to just keep attending to those changes that happen. You know, I have a niece who joined the Air Force, and she decided to be a military cop in the Air Force. And so her dad, who was a former Marine, and I were both very interested in her experience. And we spent a lot of time chatting with her and giving her feedback on her experiences as a young, basically a military police woman in the Air Force. But then her cousins, who we call brothers and sisters from an our perspective, are heavily involved with her, also giving her feedback. So we have a lot of family members just watching her, her experience in the Air Force as she's beginning her first deployment. And that's the way extended families are, I think. But I wanted to share that with you. Is Dusty back?
I believe so. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead, Dusty.
I apologize again for my connectivity issues. I'm even on a wired connection today, so I'm not sure here, but I'll keep rolling forward. And Ray, I completely agree. The family is always in flux, and from a family systems perspective, any change in any part of that family structure will elicit effects on every other part of the family system. There's no way to stop it, any single change. So when we're working with families, especially with veterans stuff, we promote, even a personal change on an individual level has the potential to have a positive impact on the whole family, because change doesn't happen in a bubble. So last little part of this one. So the options, we move in there. What are the options to influence the situation? So this is just a general discussion of, what can we do? What can't we do? What do you think kind of thing? And this is where individuals will bring in their own values and cultural perspective, which is really important to it, because then the options that are brainstormed have cultural relevance at that point. So at this point, I really urge, especially new therapists that aren't sure, let your clients or your families or whoever you're working with really do their own exploration there so that it has value relevance and cultural relevance when the options come up. Then finally, the easy part, what now? What are the next steps for a listing change? So this is a pretty straightforward model. What's your goal? What do you want to do? What's the reality of the current situation? What's the current state? What can you do? What are your options? And then great, what are you going to do today? What's the plan for this one thing? And so it's a very simplified model of change, but it presents this model that people can look at and go, okay, all right, I'm struggling with this, and this is what it is. Now I know what to do. I need to look at what I can do and pick something. Even if it's the wrong thing or it doesn't work, that's okay, which is going to bring us into our next model here. This is PDSA. So do we have any process improvement nerds in the audience today? If so, they're all looking at this going, yeah, PDSA, move on, buddy. Come on, we know what this is. So PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act. And this is a really straightforward approach. It's incredibly, incredibly powerful, both with families or in working with processes within organizations. So we start out with the P, the plan. What are you going to do? What's your idea? So out of that grow model, you campus stuff, you decided I'm going to try this thing. Great, let's try that. That's the do. So in the do, we give it a go. We see how it goes. We study it. How was it? What were the outcomes? What were the behavioral outcomes? Did it work? Was it a total catastrophe? Did everybody blow up, get mad with each other, and start throwing food at the table? What happened? So we want to look at that. That's the study piece of it. Did the thing I try work? No, it didn't. So at that point, we move to the act section, which is to adopt, modify, or discard the change. And I put in there that this PDSA rotates. It's cyclical. You go through it every time. So we give something a try, see how it goes, and then make changes as necessary. So it's, again, it seems very simplistic, but it's a really straightforward model for identifying emotions, bringing that content in, taking a look at the situation, identifying what the options are, pulling in the cultural value into those options and selecting the one that means the most to you and has the best potential for positive outcomes. Giving it a try and seeing what happens, and then doing something different or adopting it as a permanent family change. So that's the basics I have for my presentation today. And I want to make sure that I have plenty of time to open up to you guys. So questions, comments, concerns, feedback, food to throw, anything?
Sean, would you like to further develop the thoughts that you have that you're putting into chat that you and Jim are dialoguing about? I'm curious about that. Jim?
Well, basically, I'm just agreeing with Sean. So I've been paying attention to what he's saying, and it is true. I mean, in our families, in our communities, we're very, like he says, very cognizant. We pay a lot of attention to body language, eye contact, tone of voice, things like that. And and I don't know, like Sean says, it's ingrained in us. I don't know if it's like something that's, that we've kind of developed as a result of years and years and years of being lied to and what have you. So, but I do agree with what he's saying.
Yep, you summed it up pretty good there.
My name is Lori, and I have something kind of random if the group is open to hearing.
Go ahead, Lori.
So I started working on the Shoshone Paiute Reservation a couple years ago, and something happened to me, and I haven't really been able to process it with anybody, so I'm really grateful for this group. So I'm non-native, and I was doing a group at the detention center, which first of all, I don't really like public speaking. So groups are very intimidating to me.
Mhm.
But part of substance use group work is we typically have people write their obituary. And the rationale behind that is to like, what do you want people to know about you? Like, how do you want your legacy to live on? You know, and it's a chance for them to kind of correct it in the moment, you know, that future thinking, but knowing that they could change it, you know, now. And so I presented that to the group, and several of them in there got really nervous, really scared. And I kind of picked up on something, and I'm like, you know, what's going on? And they're like, we can't do that. Like, if we do that, that's calling bad spirits to us.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was a huge realization for me. You know, I just didn't know that part of Native culture. And so I was able to shift it to just making it into a goal statement kind of thing. But I just kind of want to hear what people have to say about
Mhm.
that.
Mhm. Well, thank you for sharing on that. That's I could really resonate with what you were describing from within my people's context. Oftentimes Navajos are described as being fearful of death, and that's not really the case. I think you got a really good example of how many natives approach um, death and dying. I was thinking this morning that there are two definites in our life. One is birth, one is death, and how each happens is pretty much up to the Creator. But the blessing of our lives is that we experience birth and death in our life. You know, we have babies that are born, we have relatives and friends that pass on, and that's our life experience. And they're both um, from a Navajo perspective, they're both approached very sacredly. We have processes for birth among our babies that we adhere to, that we respect, that we honor. But we also have processes when a person passes into the other place. But both are so sacred, especially that the death process is so sacred that we know that it happens, and our grounding is to be here now, and to focus on being good people here and right now, to do the best we can with wherever we are and what we have. And in Navajo, we're told not to jump ahead of ourselves, And death is one of those things that is way out there that we don't know how that's going to happen for ourselves and for anybody. And from that perspective, we treat that experience very sacredly. And I know that the activity that you described would bring a lot of anxiety to Navajo people who are fairly traditionally grounded, because it's something we don't talk about. But because we don't talk about it doesn't mean we're afraid of death. It just means that we respect that experience, and because we don't know how that's going to be, or how that's going to happen, you know, we pretty much let it be. And what we do then, our songs and our prayers and our blessings, is honor the life we have, because this is where we are today. And our relatives who have passed on, we honor the lives they have and the experiences they've given us in their lives, and honor that and respectfully too. And then we move ahead. That's my response to what you're describing with that activity. It's a very common thing, and it's not true for all Native people. There's some Native cultural ways that treat death and dying quite a bit differently. But I think many of the Southwestern tribes are similar to what you're describing. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very uncommon for, like in Ray's area, to be able to find somebody who is willing to even talk about like death and things like this. But a lot of the other tribes are usually talk about it quite a bit, because in order to learn about like the road that's traveled afterwards, the process of burying and the wakes and all these other things of why they do certain things. We always believe it's very important to know those things so that we don't do something that we're not supposed to do. Like in this tribe here, everybody's normally very quiet when somebody dies, especially those that are related to the family or something like that, because we don't want to catch their attention in any way, because that can take them off their path and they may not
Mm-hmm.
get where they're supposed to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Lori, as you were talking about the legacy part, so one of the things out of Pueblo of Laguna, working with the groups, it wasn't necessarily what your legacy is going to be in that respect, being able to describe that. But what I had group members do was reflect back on somebody from their past, their grandparent, their parents, their grandparents, their great grandparents, so the way they thought about them, and the way they thought about their legacy, and not necessarily to design their own legacy, but to think about it in the present. What are my actions now?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to create that legacy for my kids, my grandkids, my great grandkids. So when they look back at me, they'll be able to say, well, he was like this,
Mm-hmm.
and so it wasn't necessarily getting them to design, who they were going to be, it's or to think like that in a future tense, but to try to relate it to the somebody they know from their past, and then to focus on the behavior that they're presenting right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the approach we took.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just
Yeah.
want to thank you all for offering me some feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I haven't been able to talk to anybody about this, so just being able to share, like, I'm really getting emotional about it. It's very profound to me. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I may suggest, Laurie, is that in the exercises that you design for for people you work with, to have exercises that explore, expand, develop on, and celebrate life experiences, and have a strength-based approach on people's experiences here and now, and that resonates more with my people, for example. Because our ceremonies are very much here now. Yeah, we acknowledge where we are and the good things we have, and the not good things too. But with veterans in particular, I was thinking that Native veterans, when we go into the military, we anticipate a time to be able to. For me, for example, coming from a lineage that included warriors, veterans, to go into a process where I would attempt to follow their path. And the way the military system is structured was really difficult to do that in a real honorable way. The main thing that kept getting in the way were the drugs and alcohol. That's what really impedes a lot of our Native young people from effectively having a grounded military experience, but then also affects our departures from the military. And I don't know very many veterans, and Native veterans especially, who don't come out alcohol abusing or even alcohol dependent, because that's the culture within many, many military settings. And that takes us off our path. and contemplated that a lot the last few months, and the challenges of that, and that's how the contemporary military experience differs from native warriorness or the native warrior ways, where you took care of yourself and you maintained a high state of alertness and well-being to be able to be the best protector you could. And that's how the native way of being a warrior and being a veteran is quite a bit different from the Euro-American system of built into the Army and the Navy, the Marines, and the Air Force. And our young people come out, and certainly I do come out quite a bit different that way. So I wanted to share those perceptions with you. But thank you.
Hey, Steve,
Yes.
can I jump in for just a second here before we wrap up? I wanted to elaborate a little bit on what Ray was saying there and things that happened going into the military. Back in the 50s and the 60s, when they were drafting people in for Vietnam, a lot of the natives got drafted and put into, went into the Marines and recon as scouts. And so they were out there in front of force recon. The reason they did that is because they knew that the Native Americans were really good at scouting. They were good at being aware of their surroundings, things like that. But when they actually hit the field, they found out they weren't any better than anybody else, and nobody could figure out why all of a sudden, once they got out there in the field, they didn't have those skills anymore. Well, the first thing they did was cut their hair when they came in to the military, like we all got our haircuts. Finally, I think it's around 2005, research was done on specifically why that happened. And what it came out to is our sensory perception and the hair. We've got our hair out here, and you can actually feel and be acutely aware of changes in air density, temperature, movement, things like that, up to several hundred yards away, because it'll make a single hair move. And you notice that, and it moved on the right side of my head, not my left. What's over there on my right? So that's just one example of how a lot of these things that were skills or perceptions that natives have when they go into the military that are immediately stripped away from them, tools that they had that were immediately stripped away and taken away. And, even down to spiritual ceremonial practices, all of that stripped away and taken away. And then they're reprogrammed behavior mod on a 5th grade level in basic AIT and clear through the military. Then you come back out, and for myself, even, it was always well, how do I get that stuff back? I knew I had it at one time. Now, how do I do it now? And some of those things that the military takes away from people when they go in, those skills that they have, those the senses that they have, perceptions, things like that are stripped away. And then for a number of years, then how do you get those back when you come back out to live back in your culture and live the way you did before? It's a learning curve and traumatic in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to share that as one example, kind of, to touch on what you were talking about there, Ray. That's actually one they measured and said, oh, well, this is why, that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I can be
About
when
it
they
took
did
50
studies and
years.
stuff. When they did those studies afterwards, they made it mandatory that all the scouts had to have long hair.
Mm-hmm.
So they started to do that. But actually in Vietnam, 70% of all special forces were Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, in the military code of the regulations there, it's written that if a Native comes in the military and they put their religion as Native American church, they can keep their hair long.
Yeah.
But they won't tell you that.
Yeah, that came into play with the Religious Freedoms Act.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thank you for the discussion, guys. Any other questions for Dusty before we depart? I put into chat that we're having a webinar next Friday. It's going to be a little kind of interesting. Where Steve and Sean and Dave and others are working on a 6-part series on winter life, native winter life living. And our first session next Friday we'll have several of us on the panel talking about basically our experiences these days and how we're coping and how we're sustaining our resilience and how we're taking care of ourselves and moving ahead with our lives during these real difficult times. So I want to invite each of you to join us next Friday and share with us your time. So there'll be an announcement next Monday, I believe, when the center does its weekly calendar of events thing. But I wanted to make sure everyone knew that. Okay. I'm going to ask my brother Dave if he can close us out with a blessing if no one else has any comments. Go ahead, Dave.
Gotta wait for my phone to stop ringing. Okay. So I'm Dave Natseway from Pueblo Laguna. So David is my English name, Christian name. But the name that was given to me is Kuesiwa, which is the action that the parrot takes with the wings when he starts to fly. So, and my big clan is parrot, and my little clan is bear. So I'll go ahead and start asking our mother to watch over us. So Kwatsi Naya Shranaya Sehopa. Thank you for bringing us together in this space today to listen and to share our thoughts and words. Teach us patience, love, and compassion, and to honor one another. Remind us to respect our Mother Earth, who nourishes us and provides us with all that we need to take care of ourselves. Comfort us during these times and guide us to understand that the Creator has a purpose for what we are experiencing in the world today. Let us be present for each other, to encourage each other and support each other. So thank you for all for being here today. Doae, Hushjame Gome, Duishatskas, Duishia. So the ending is just a thank you. And so the male and the female version of having strength is Hushjame Gome. Hushjame being the male, Gome being the female. Duishatskas is be well. And Nuishtia'a is to smile and be happy, for everything that we have, because the Creator has given us a lot, and not to dwell on the negative things, but just to be happy and smile, for the things that we have. So. Thank you.
Go ahead, brother. And thank you, Dusty, for spending some time with us and teaching. I really appreciate the value of what you've given us today. And Sean, Steve, and everybody else. Everyone have a good weekend. Take care of yourself. Wear your mask and be safe. Okay. Thank you.
We'll meet again for this broadcast in 2 weeks. And Ray,
Hey, that's rude, Ray. You wear your mask.
please try and join us for our broadcast on the winter months next week, 1 to 3 p.m. Central. Look for the announcement, and we'd be happy to have you. Great to have everyone here today. I want to again thank Dusty. I want to thank Ray and Sean, and of course Dave for joining us as well. It's been a really great hour. So thank you all. Stay safe, stay connected, stay healthy.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and post that winter registration link for anyone who's still on and interested. That announcement should be coming out Monday as well.
Thank you very much, Ella.
Yeah, when you mentioned it, I was like, oh, I should just throw it in. So,
Hey,
yeah.
We'll put this out on our webpage and blast it out on our listserv as well. You can contact me or Sean or Ray for more information as well through our center.
Awesome. Thank you guys for a great session.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah. Thanks, Ella, for your help.